Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever looked at a map of India and just wondered how an empire as vast and powerful as the Mughals could seemingly just, well, fade away,
Hmm.
and how in its place, a trading company from, a tiny island nation managed to conquer an entire subcontinent?
It's a huge question. And what's truly fascinating here is how multiple seemingly disparate factors converge. They created this immense power vacuum in 18th century India.
Right.
And this led to one of the most profound geopolitical transformations in history.
Mm.
Our sources today, a detailed historical account and some specific summaries, they really lay out the intricate dance of decline, rise, and eventual conquest.
So today we're going on a deep dive. We're going to explore these critical 18th century turning points in modern Indian history, basically from the twilight of the Mughal Empire right up to the dawn of British dominance.
Yeah, it's quite a century.
By the end of this, you'll have a clear grasp of how India's political landscape was completely redrawn, and hopefully offer some surprising insights and maybe a few aha moments along the way. So let's start right at the beginning of this period. Aurangzeb, arguably the last truly powerful Mughal ruler, he dies in 1707. What exactly happened then? Did the imperial throne just become like a revolving door?
It absolutely became a revolving door.
Yeah.
I think the key insight here isn't just that the rulers were weak, but how this systemic instability, right at the very top, created a vacuum.
Okay.
A vacuum that allowed the empire to essentially unravel from within. You saw this rapid succession of emperors, often manipulated by powerful ministers, different factions at court.
So internal politics basically tearing it apart.
Exactly.
Mm.
Figures like Jahandar Shah, Farrukh Shah, they became mere puppets. And then you have Muhammad Shah Rangila. He reigned for nearly 30 years, believe it or not.
30 years. Wow.
Yes, but he was so consumed by, well, courtly pleasures and intrigue that his reign saw massive territorial losses. This internal chaos was then compounded by constant succession wars among the heirs.
Right, fighting amongst themselves.
And the rise of these powerful nobles acting as kingmakers, like the Sayyid brothers, and crucially, a complete breakdown of the imperial revenue system. That's the Jagirdari crisis.
Hold on, the Jagirdari crisis. Can you quickly explain what that means? Why was it so significant?
Sure. So the Jagirdari system was how the Mughal state assigned land revenues, the Jagirs, to its nobles. It was instead of paying them a direct salary, basically.
Okay, so land for service.
Right. In return, these nobles were supposed to maintain troops for the emperor. But during this crisis, there just weren't enough productive Jagirs to go around. Or the revenue collection itself became completely inefficient.
I see.
This meant nobles weren't getting paid reliably. Their loyalty, it just evaporated. And the empire's military strength crumbled from the inside out.
So a breakdown of trust and, well, power at the very core. But a weakened empire isn't just vulnerable from within, is it?
No, absolutely not.
It also becomes a tempting target for, external invaders.
Precisely. And these external blows were devastating. Think of it like a 1-2 punch on an already staggering fighter.
Yeah.
In 1739, Nadir Shah from Persia delivered a crushing defeat to the Mughals at the Battle of Karnal. And what's astonishing isn't just that he won, he sacked Delhi.
Sacked Delhi itself.
He looted unimaginable wealth. We're talking the iconic peacock throne, the Kohinoor diamond.
Legendary treasures.
Exactly. But this wasn't just about plunder. It utterly shattered the myth of Mughal invincibility. It signaled to every ambitious regional power and every European trader that the empire wasn't just vulnerable, it was actively crumbling.
A green light, basically.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And not long after, Ahmad Shah Abdali from Afghanistan invaded India 7 times between 1748 and 1767.
7 times.
7 times. He caused mass destruction, further weakened the remaining Indian powers, and critically set the stage for later conflicts, like the huge Third Battle of Panipat.
So by the mid-18th century, where did that leave the Mughals?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the Mughal emperor became little more than a figurehead. They really only controlled Delhi and its immediate surroundings. Real power began shifting dramatically.
Okay, so the sunder couldn't hold. As the Mughals faltered, who stepped up? What kind of new power centers began to emerge across India? You mentioned this fascinating mosaic.
Yeah, a whole bunch of them. Many regions that were once Mughal provinces became practically independent, though some initially maintained a sort of nominal loyalty to the emperor, at least on paper.
Right, like who?
Take Bengal, for instance. Rashid Qali Khan, appointed Nawab in 1717, he essentially declared autonomy. Shifted the capital to Murshidabad, controlled Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. Pretty much independent.
Okay.
His successor, Allahabad Khan, was a strong administrator. He even managed to repel Maratha raids for a while. But then came his grandson, Siraj-ud-Daulah.
Ah, and that name rings a bell. Plassey, right?
Exactly. His defeat at the Battle of Plassey in 1757 by Robert Clive marked a definitive turn. It essentially handed Bengal, or control of it, over to the British East India Company.
A massive turning point. And what was happening elsewhere on the map were similar things happening.
Very similar patterns. Moving west, look at Awadh. Sadat Ali Khan established autonomous rule there around 1722, capital at Faizabad, later Lucknow.
Okay.
The Awadh Nawabs also largely retained only, nominal loyalty to the Mughals. They're effectively running their own state.
Got it.
And further south, Hyderabad followed a parallel path. Nizam-ul-Mulk, Asaf Jah first, he was a Mughal governor originally, but he founded an independent kingdom in 1724. And the Nizams of Hyderabad ruled right up until Indian independence.
Wow, quite the legacy.
Indeed. But perhaps the most formidable challenge to Mughal supremacy, at least initially, came from the Marathas.
Ah, yes, the Marathas, they were expanding rapidly, weren't they?
Hugely. Peshwa Balji Vishwanath really laid the foundation of their power structure, the Peshwa dominance. And his son, Peshwa Baji Rao, he was a brilliant military strategist, expanded Maratha influence deep into North India.
So they were looking like the successors for a time.
They certainly seemed like the main contenders. However, under Balaji Baji Rao, also known as Nana Sahib, the Marathas suffered a decisive defeat. Ahmad Shah Abdali crushed them at the Third Battle of Panipat in 1761.
Panipat again, a crucial battleground.
Always. And this defeat led to a significant shift within the Marathas themselves. It saw the emergence of the Maratha Confederacy. Powerful regional houses like the Scindias of Gwalior, the Holkars of Indore, Gaekwoods of Baroda, the Bonsals of Nagpur, they essentially carved out their own semi-independent domains.
So less centralized power after Panipat.
Exactly. A loose alliance rather than a unified empire.
Okay. And what about the Sikhs in the Punjab?
The Sikhs also rose dramatically during this period. Guru Gobind Singh founded the Khalsa back in 1699. This really transformed Sikhism into a more structured, collective, and, frankly, militant community ready to defend its faith and territory.
Right.
Later, Banda Singh Bahadur led a significant revolt. He abolished the zamindari system of the areas he controlled and established Sikh rule in parts of Punjab.
A real challenge to the old order.
Definitely. The 18th century then saw the rise of the Sikh missals. These were like loose military confederacies, almost independent clans or regional warlord groups, each controlling a portion of Punjab.
Interesting structure.
Very. And later, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, who reigned from 1801 to 1839, impressively united these disparate missals. He captured Lahore in 1799 and established the formidable Sikh Empire.
So a really powerful, unified Sikh state emerged from that.
For a time, yes.
Very powerful.
That truly is a fascinating mosaic. And it wasn't just these larger entities, right? You mentioned smaller but still significant regional powers.
Absolutely. You also had players like the Junts under Suraj Mal. He built a strong kingdom based in Firozpur, even defeated the Mughals at Agra at one point.
Really defeated them at Agra.
Yes, and then there were the Rohillas, led by Najib-ud-Dowlah. They controlled Rohilkhand, a region in western Uttar Pradesh, and they actually allied with Abdali at Panipat.
Okay, so lots of shifting alliances, constantly shifting, which, as you said, raises that important question. With so many new players all vying for power in this newly fragmented landscape, who would eventually come out on top?
That is the critical question, because while all these Indian regional powers were, well, duking it out, there were other ambitious players arriving by sea. Let's unpack that story. How did European trading companies find their way to India, and why did their presence become so absolutely pivotal?
Well, the Portuguese were the pioneers, really. Vasco da Gama landed at Calicut way back in 1498. He established the first European sea route directly to India.
The famous voyage.
Indeed. Their aims were initially focused on controlling the lucrative spice trade and, well, also spreading Christianity to some extent. Figures like Francisco de Almeida introduced the Blue Water Policy, focusing on naval supremacy, and Afonso de Albuquerque captured Goa in 1510, making it their capital. They also held Daman du Bassein.
So they established quite a foothold early on.
They did, but by the 17th century, their influence began to decline. They started losing dominance to newer European arrivals.
Okay, so the Portuguese blazed the trail. Who followed them?
Soon after, you had the Dutch. Their East India Company, the VOC, established its first factory at Pulicat around 1608. They focused heavily on spices, but also textiles.
Right.
They were actually quite successful in pushing the Portuguese out of many Southeast Asian ports. But ultimately, in India, they were defeated by the English at the Battle of Badara in 1759. That effectively ended their major presence there.
So the Dutch were knocked out by the English. Enter the English East India Company.
Exactly. Chartered by Queen Elizabeth I back in 1600. Their first factory was at Surat, established around 1619, importantly, with permission from the Mughal Emperor Jahangir.
Ah, so they started with official sanction.
Initially, yes. They established major settlements like Madras, Fort St. George, built in 1639, Bombay, which they received as part of a royal dowry from the Portuguese in 1661, and Calcutta, founded by Job Charnock around 1690.
So building up key coastal bases.
Key strategic bases. Their early focus, like the others, was trade. Textiles, spices, indigo. But their ambitions grew.
And the French were in the mix too, right?
Absolutely. The French Compagnie des Indes established their first base at Pondicherry in 1673. That became their main stronghold. They also held Chandernagore in Bengal. And under leaders like Joseph-François Duplessis, they aimed to aggressively compete with the English, not just for trade, but eventually for territory and influence.
Duplessis is a key name there.
A very key figure in trying to build a French empire in India. Oh, and we should briefly mention the Danish, too. They had a limited presence, places like Tranquebar, but ultimately sold their possessions to the British in the 19th century.
Okay, so a crowded field. Portugal, Dutch, English, French, even the Danes, all vying for the same rich resources. It sounds like tensions were bound to boil over.
They were inevitable.
India effectively became a battleground for a global power struggle between these European nations, didn't it?
That's exactly what happened. And this manifested most clearly in the Carnatic Wars, primarily between the English and the French, fought on the southeastern coast of India.
The Carnatic Wars. Okay.
What's truly astonishing when you think about it is how these conflicts, stemming from European rivalries like the War of Austrian Succession or the Seven Years' War, were fought largely by proxy armies, using Indian soldiers on Indian soil.
Right.
And they became the definitive battles for India's future dominance between the European powers.
So walk us through them. The First Carnatic War.
The First Carnatic War ran from 1746 to 1748. Globally, it was tied to the War of Austrian Succession. The French, led by the ambitious Duplessis, actually managed to capture Madras from the British.
Oh, really? So the French scored an early victory.
They did. However, the war ended with the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle in Europe, which basically hit reset. Madras was returned to the British. So no major political shift in India resulted from that first round.
Okay, so round one, a draw politically speaking. How did the rivalry evolve in the Second and Third Wars? This must be where things really heated up.
Absolutely. The Second Carnatic War from 1749 to 1754 was different. It wasn't directly tied to a European war initially. Instead, it was triggered by succession disputes within Indian states, specifically in Hyderabad and the Carnatic region itself. Both the French and British-backed rival claimants.
Ah, interfering in local politics.
Precisely. And this is where Robert Clive really made his name for the British. His daring capture and defense of Arcot in 1751 completely turned the tide.
The Siege of Arcot, right? Famous story.
Exactly. It revealed that European military organization and leadership, even with small numbers, could be decisive when intervening in these internal Indian conflicts. The Treaty of Pondicherry that ended this war confirmed a British-backed Nawab in the Carnatic. The British gained significant political influence from this one.
Okay, so the British definitely gained ground there. What about the Third War? That sounds like the final showdown.
It really was.
Yeah.
The Third Carnatic War, from 1757 to 1763, coincided directly with the global 7 Years' War between Britain and France. This was the big one. The decisive moment in India came at the Battle of Wandiwash in 1760.
Wandiwash.
There, the British forces under Sir Eyre Coote completely defeated the French forces led by Comte de Lally. It was a shattering blow for the French.
A decisive military victory.
Absolutely. This was followed by the Siege of Pondicherry in 1761. The British captured the French headquarters, their last major stronghold. The war formally ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1763.
And the consequences of that treaty for India.
Huge. It restricted the French to just a few small trading posts like Pondicherry, but crucially stripped them of any right to fortify them or maintain troops. No political power allowed.
So French political ambition in India was finished.
Completely finished. This really underscores how pivotal the Carnatic Wars were. They transformed the British East India Company from being just one trading company among many into the dominant European power, the aspiring rulers. And they permanently ended French dreams of an Indian empire.
So with the French effectively out of the picture, the British East India Company was now poised, wasn't it? Ready to expand its influence much more aggressively.
Exactly.
And their next major target, as you mentioned earlier, was one of the richest regions in India, Bengal.
This is where British ascendancy truly takes off. The Battle of Plassey in 1757, which happened during the Third Carnatic War, was absolutely pivotal. Robert Clive, leading the company forces, faced the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Daulah.
Oh,
But the key move here wasn't just military might. It was Clive's conspiracy, basically. He bribed Mir Jafar, Siraj's commander-in-chief.
betrayal on the battlefield.
A notorious betrayal. Mir Jafar held back his troops, effectively selling out the Nawab mid-battle. Clive won a victory that militarily shouldn't have been so easy. Mir Jafar was then installed as a puppet Nawab.
And the impact of this.
Massive. The company gained effective control over Bengal's vast treasury. This was an unimaginable boost in their power, their finances. It funded further campaigns.
Be truly strategic and, well, frankly, a pretty brutal move using deception. What happened next in Bengal? It wasn't just Plassey, was it?
No, the consolidation took another step. The next major event was the Battle of Buxar, fought in 1764. This was, in many ways, a more significant military victory for the British than Plassey.
How so?
Because here, the EIC forces under Hector Munro faced a genuinely formidable combined army. It included the Nawab of Bengal, Mir Qasim, who had replaced Mir Jafar and tried to assert independence, the Nawab of Awadh, Siraj-ud-Daulah, and even the Mughal Emperor himself, Shah Alam II.
Wow, that's a serious coalition.
A very serious coalition. And the British won a crushing victory. This absolutely cemented their military supremacy in eastern India. There was no doubt left after Buxar.
So what came out of Buxar? A treaty?
Yes, the very important Treaty of Allahabad, signed in 1765. Clive was back in India by then and negotiated it. Under this treaty, the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II, now essentially a dependent of the company, granted them the Diwani rights for Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa.
The Diwani, what exactly did that entail?
It meant the right to collect the revenues, the taxes, from these incredibly wealthy provinces. The company became the official revenue collector. They paid only a fixed annual amount to the emperor and kept the rest.
So they got the power and the money, but without the direct responsibility of governing initially.
Exactly. It gave the EIC de facto political and financial control. This unprecedented revenue stream became the engine, the absolute foundation for further British expansion across the entire subcontinent.
Okay, so with the financial engine of Bengal now firmly in their control, the British turn their attention to other powerful Indian states. You start to see a pattern emerge, don't you? Strategic alliances often force relentless military pressure.
And almost always,
Yeah.
British dominance in the end.
That's right. The British engaged in these protracted, often brutal conflicts across the subcontinent. Look at the Mysore Wars.
Against Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, right?
The very same.
Yeah.
Spanning from 1767 to 1799. They saw fierce resistance. Hyder Ali was incredibly capable. He nearly took Madras in the First Anglo-Mysore War.
Nearly took Madras. Wow. His son, Tipu Sultan, the Tiger of Mysore, fought even more fiercely. He tried to modernize his army, use rockets, seek alliances with the French. He really resisted British expansion.
A formidable opponent.
Absolutely. But in the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War, Tipu Sultan was finally defeated and killed defending his capital, Seringapatam, in 1799. Mysore then became a British-controlled princely state, ruled by the old Hindu dynasty they restored. These wars showed intense opposition, but the end result was British dominance in the south.
Okay, so Mysore subdued. What about the Marathas? They were still a major force, weren't they?
They were the biggest remaining challenge. The Maratha Wars, fought intermittently from 1775 all the way to 1819, marked the slow, grinding disintegration of Maratha power.
A long struggle.
Very long. The First War ended somewhat inconclusively with the Treaty of Salbai in 1782, which actually brought about 20 years of relative peace between the British and the main Maratha powers.
Okay, a pause.
But the Second War, from 1803 to 1805, was different. It was triggered when the Peshwa, Baji II, facing internal threats, signed the Treaty Bassein in 1802, basically accepting a British subsidiary alliance,
Seeking British protection.
which other Maratha chiefs saw as submission. This led to war. The British, under figures like Arthur Wellesley, later Duke of Wellington, defeated the various Maratha forces, Scindia, Holkar, Barnsley, in major battles. This led to significant territorial losses for the Marathas.
So the Confederacy was starting to break under pressure.
Exactly. And the Third Maratha War, from 1817 to 1819, was really the final nail in the Maratha coffin, as historians often say. Peshwa Baji II tried to throw off British control, but was decisively defeated. He was forced into the Treaty of Poona, leading to massive land cessions.
And the result?
The Peshwaship itself was abolished. The Maratha Confederacy effectively ended. Most of the other Maratha chiefs became rulers of princely states, but under tight British control. This marked full British political dominance over central India by around 1819.
A complete transformation of the political map there. And finally, the Sikhs in the northwest.
Yes, the Anglo-Sikh Wars came a bit later, but were crucial for consolidating British power right up to the Afghan border. The First War, 1845 to 1846, happened after Ranjit Singh's death, when the Sikh kingdom was less stable.
Right.
The Sikhs resisted British interference but lost key battles. The Treaty of Lahore forced Punjab to give up territory and pay a heavy indemnity. Crucially, the British installed a resident and a regency council, effectively reducing the young Sikh ruler, Duleep Singh, to a puppet.
So indirect control established.
Initially. But then the Second Anglo-Sikh War erupted in 1848-49, sparked by a Sikh revolt against this control. The British won decisively at the Battle of Gujarat in 1849, the Battle of the Guns.
And the outcome of that?
Complete annexation. Punjab was fully annexed into British India in April 1849. The Kohinoor diamond, which had made its way to Ranjit Singh, was acquired by the British and presented to Queen Victoria.
So conquest complete in that region too. It's striking how relentless it was. But you mentioned earlier, beyond outright war, the British also had other methods, more subtle perhaps, but equally effective.
Absolutely. Equally brutal in their consequences. This is where you see the sheer strategic cunning, the political maneuvering at play.
Like what?
Well, one of the most effective tools was the subsidiary alliance policy, really perfected by Lord Wellesley when he was Governor General from 1798 to 1805.
Subsidiary alliance, how did that work?
Essentially, an Indian ruler would be compelled or persuaded to sign a treaty with the company. Under this treaty, the ruler had to accept a permanent stationing of British troops within their territory, ostensibly for their protection.
Protection they had to pay for.
Precisely.
Right.
They had to pay for the upkeep of these troops, often by ceding territory. And crucially, they had to give up control over their foreign policy. They couldn't negotiate with other states, Indian or European, without British approval. They also had to dismiss any non-British Europeans from their service.
So they kept their throne, but lost all real independence.
Exactly. They became protectorates, subservient allies, key states like Hyderabad, the first major one in 1798, Mysore after Tipu's defeat in 1799, Awadh in 1801, and the Peshwa in 1802 all signed these alliances.
A way to gain control without the cost and hassle of direct administration, at least initially.
A truly smart, and you could say brutal strategy. It slowly strangled the independence of these states.
And there was another policy, even more infamous perhaps, the doctrine of lapse.
Yes, the doctrine of lapse. This is strongly associated with Lord Dalhousie, Governor General from 1848 to 1856, though the principle wasn't entirely new.
What was the doctrine?
The policy stated that if the ruler of a princely state under British influence died without a direct, natural-born male heir, their state would be lapsed, meaning annexed directly into British India. Adoption, which was a common practice for succession in India, was not recognized by the British for this purpose unless they explicitly approved it beforehand, which they rarely did for independent-minded states.
So, a convenient excuse to annex states.
Many saw it exactly that way. Examples of states annexed under this policy include Satara in 1848, Jhansi in 1853, leading to the famous Rani of Jhansi's resistance later, and Nagpur in 1854.
And Awadh, you mentioned it earlier, was that annexed under lapse?
No, Awadh is a controversial case. It had a direct heir, but Dalhousie annexed it in 1856 anyway, citing decades of alleged misgovernment by the Nawab. This annexation in particular caused huge resentment, as Awadh had been a loyal ally for a long time.
So lapse, misgovernment, basically justifications were found.
It certainly seemed that way to many Indian rulers. The doctrine of lapse and the annexation of Awadh significantly increased paranoia and anger among the remaining princes and the population. It was a major contributing factor, many argue, to the outbreak of the Great Rebellion of 1857, just a year later.
It really sounds like the combination of military victories and these calculated annexation policies just systematically dismantled Indian autonomy.
That's exactly what happened. They quietly strangled the remaining princely states, expanded British territory massively, and set the stage for both direct British rule and the major resistance that was to come.
It's astonishing, really, how these seemingly legalistic policies were just another layer of conquest, wasn't it?
Absolutely. They provided a kind of veneer of legitimacy or justification for what was, In essence, a complete political and economic takeover of the subcontinent over the course of this crucial century.
So we've journeyed through this century of truly immense change. We started with the decline of a mighty empire, the Mughals. We saw the rise of vibrant, often competing regional powers. We followed the fierce competition among the European trading companies and ultimately witnessed the strategic conquest and consolidation of British power right across India. You've really helped us see how internal weaknesses, foreign invasions, and these cunning British policies all converge to completely redefine the subcontinent.
It's a complex story, definitely. So many interacting factors.
It really is. And thinking about all this, it raises an important question, doesn't it? As you look at the complexities of modern nation states today, not just in India, but globally,
Yeah.
how much do you think the dynamics we've discussed, the shifting allegiances, the rise and fall of regional powers, the way foreign trade initially entered the picture, seemingly benignly, how much do those 18th century patterns continue to echo in the world today?
It's a fascinating thought. It really makes you wonder about the long-term ripple effects, the deep historical currents that come from such a dramatic and often forceful reshaping of power. It's something to reflect on, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Well, we hope this deep dive has given you, our listeners, a clearer, more informed perspective on this absolutely pivotal era in Indian and world history.
Hope it was insightful.
Until next time, keep digging, keep questioning, and keep learning.